Hello, everyone, and welcome to Diabetes and Prediabetes Education. My name is Hannah Hall, and I am an intern at UW Health, but I am working with the Department of Correction for my public health rotation. And throughout this presentation, we will go over 3 different parts, and in between each part, there will be a section for questions, so you can feel free to pause the video and allow for questions at any time. So what is diabetes? There are 3 different types of diabetes: type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and gestational diabetes. And gestational diabetes happens when somebody is pregnant, so we won't be going over that today. However, just know it is very similar to type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where the body's immune cells attack the cells of the pancreas, causing insulin not to be produced. So this is a problem because insulin is needed for glucose to leave the blood and enter the cell to be used for energy. So without insulin, your cells are not getting the energy they need to function. And the risk factors for type 1 diabetes are genetics, family history, and age. So usually type 1 diabetes has an onset in childhood or adolescence. So that means it starts or occurs at a younger age. However, there are some cases that occur later in life. And then type 2 diabetes is caused by insulin resistance or abnormal insulin secretion. So in other words, the body produces insulin, but the cells are not able to use it effectively, which causes high blood sugar or high glucose. And the risk factors for this are obesity, family history, history of gestational diabetes, impaired glucose metabolism, physical inactivity, and age. And usually, type 2 diabetes happens at an older age, but over the last several years, there have been more cases of type 2 diabetes happening all throughout the life cycle, and especially in children. There's been an increase of type 2 diabetes. So I really like this example. It helps me understand what diabetes is. So diabetes can be compared to a highway for glucose without an exit. So I don't know if you've ever seen a car accident on a highway or like a traffic jam when cars keep entering the highway and not enough cars are leaving. So that's kind of what diabetes is. So when you eat foods that contain carbs, carbs are broken down into sugar, which enter the bloodstream. So think of sugar as a car. They enter the bloodstream, and without insulin um, being able to work effectively, the blood sugar stays in the blood, so it can't go into the cell, kind of like how a car stays on the highway and they can't exit due to the traffic jam. So how is type 2 diabetes or diabetes in general diagnosed? There are 3 common tests, but more commonly, the 2 here are listed. So there is what is called an A1C test, and this test measures the percent of hemoglobin protein in your blood that is coated with sugar. And a normal level for somebody without diabetes is about 5, and somebody with diabetes would have an A1C of 6.5 or higher. And an A1C can be or is usually taken every 3 months. So it is an average of your blood glucose over 3 months. So that's kind of what it shows. So if your blood glucose or your blood sugar runs really high, your A1C level will be high. And then for fasting glucose, this is when your blood sugar is taken after 8 hours of fasting. So you're not having anything to eat or drink except water for over 8 hours. And for somebody without diabetes, a fasting glucose would be 99 or below. And for somebody with diabetes, it would be 126 or above. So there are different treatment interventions for those with type 2 diabetes. Some treatment options look like food and lifestyle changes. So that would mean weight loss if necessary, exercise, following a carb consistent diet, and eating a balanced diet. And we will go over that a lot in today's presentation of what a balanced diet looks like. And the interventions or medications are glipizide, metformin, and insulin. And this is definitely not an exhaustive list. There are many different medications you can take, but these ones are commonly used by HSU. So I'm sure some of you have heard of the phrase count your macros. And if you haven't, that is okay. What macronutrients are is they are the molecules in food or the substances in food that provide us with calories. So there are four. There is fat, carbohydrates, protein, and alcohol. So each of those molecules provide us with calories. And it is recommended that we consume a certain amount of the three macronutrients, so carbohydrates, protein, and fat, in our daily diet. So the pie chart over on the side kind of gives an estimate of what 100% of your calories should look like. So 45 to 65% should come from carbohydrates, 10 to 35% should come from protein, and 25 to 35% should come from fat. And to give you an example of how many calories that would be of each, say somebody was following a 2,000 calorie diet, if 50% of their calories came from carbs, they'd be eating 1,000 calories per day from carbohydrate sources. And then similar to protein, if they ate 10% of protein per day and they followed a 2,000 calorie diet, 200 of those calories would come from protein. And so the purpose of this slide is to show the breakdown of what food groups you should be eating. So it is recommended to consume 45 to 65% of carbs, 10 to 35% of protein, and 25 to 35% of fat. And then if you notice, alcohol is not included in this chart because consuming alcohol when diagnosed with diabetes can be harmful for um, several reasons. And one of the most pressing reasons would be it can cause hypoglycemia. So we've learned what the macronutrients are. Now, what are sources of the macronutrients? So protein consists of meat, fish, dairy, eggs, beans, nuts, and seeds. Fat consists of butter, oils, nuts, avocado, fish, and processed foods such as like cookies, dessert, like chips, all of those sources. And then sources of carbs consist of cereal, pasta, bread, fruit, dairy, and desserts. And if you've noticed, there are some foods listed in both of the macronutrients or more than one of the macronutrients. So, for example, um, dairy is a protein, but dairy is also listed under carbs. That is because it does contain both sources of protein and carbs. So dairy has, again, protein, and then it also has natural sugar, or it has lactose, which is a carb. And then same with fish. So fish is a good source of protein, but it is also a healthy source of fat as well. So what I'm trying to get at is not all foods are only one of the macronutrients. Sometimes foods can be two of the macronutrients or even all three. So for example, like pizza. You have the crust that counts as a carb, the cheese that counts as a protein, and then depending what you put on your pizza, you could have, if you put pepperoni on it, the pepperoni would count both as a protein source and a fat source. And same with sausage. If you put sausage on there, it would count as a fat source and a protein as well. So just to give you an idea. So out of the macronutrients, carbohydrates play a huge role in diabetes. So carbs are broken down into the body and are used as the main energy source for your cells, muscle, and brain. And carbs are required for survival and performance of daily tasks. So even like standing up, walking around, blinking your eyes, open and closed. All of those movements require carbs as an energy source. And consuming carbs will raise your blood sugar. And that's why it's very important in diabetes. So, what are the sources of carbohydrates? Well, there are simple carbs, which is known as sugar, and these are easily digested. They are usually very sweet, and they will increase your blood sugar very quickly because they are so easily digested that it can go right into your bloodstream. And examples are fruit, candy, desserts, and milk. And then there are also complex carbs, and these take time to digest. They're not always sweet. They slowly increase your blood sugar. They make you feel fuller longer. And examples of complex carbs or starches are known as corn, whole grains, legumes, and potatoes. So these ones, again, complex carbs will increase your blood sugar over time. So it won't be that rapid increase. And then lastly is fiber. And fiber is also considered a complex carb, but it's kind of off in its own group because it doesn't affect your blood sugar, or if it does, it's a very small effect. And these fiber helps you feel fuller longer. It also will slow down digestion, and it has other health benefits as well as decreasing your LDL cholesterol. And one very important thing to remember is it is important to include all sources of carbs or all types of carbs, but we really want to focus for those with diabetes on eating more complex carbs and more fiber because these ones will not affect your blood sugar as quickly as the simple or sugar carbs. So, again, going over what foods raise your blood sugar. So, carbohydrates are the big guns that will raise your blood sugar. And again, sources are sugar, jelly, candy, syrup, milk, desserts, fruit. So, those were all simple carbs. And the complex carbs are starches, which an example would be potatoes and peas, and then grains. So, whole grain bread and cereal. And then foods that do not raise your blood sugar or have little effect on your blood sugar are protein or sources of protein. So, again, going back to the macronutrients, sources of protein are like chicken, turkey, sausage, plant based options could be like peanut butter, and then sources of fat. So, butter, margarine, oils, examples of, or are examples of fat. And then also there are non starchy vegetables. So these include like kind of like your leafy green and more cruciferous veggies. So like broccoli, cauliflower, green beans, carrots, asparagus, onions, tomatoes, all of those options. And then if you notice the little stars next to starchy vegetables, so these ones don't raise your blood sugar if you're consuming small portions, but since they are plants, they do still contain a small amount of carbs. So if you're eating like 2 to 3 cups, you might have to monitor for how many carbs you're eating. But again, since they are or they do contain fiber and they would be more of a complex carb, they wouldn't affect your blood sugar as quickly. So I'm sure many of you have seen the My Plate image or diagram before. So this was made by the USDA, and the goal of this is of what an American's plate should look like at every meal. So half of your plate should be of fruits and vegetables, the other half should be of grains and protein, and then you should have a non-fat dairy option or a low-fat dairy option with every meal. And if you notice, the vegetable serving is larger than the fruit serving, and the grain serving is larger than the protein serving. And a further breakdown of this or what they want you to focus on. So when you are choosing your fruits for your plate, they want you to focus on whole fruits instead of like fruit juices. This is because whole fruits will provide fiber and where fruit juices do not provide fiber. And for vegetables, they want you to vary your vegetables. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the term eat the rainbow. So this is kind of where it stems from. So they want you to incorporate vegetables of all colors. For grains, they want you to make half your grains whole. So what that means is instead of eating white bread, consume whole grain bread, or instead of eating white rice, have whole grain rice, or brown rice, excuse me. So instead of having white rice, you would have brown rice. And then protein. So vary your protein as well. Instead of eating like red meat every day, or instead of eating the same source of protein, include different proteins. So if you eat chicken every day, try to swap it maybe for some turkey or some fish, or even like plant-based options such as peanut butter. And then for dairy, they want you to move to a low-fat or fat-free dairy option. So instead of drinking whole milk or 2% milk, consume low-fat milk, so 1% or skim milk. So this is called the plate method for diabetes. So this one is similar enough to my plate, but is more tailored to those with diabetes. So this includes sources of fat at each meal. So you can see what one serving of fat looks like. That would be like 2 teaspoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of salad dressing, 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, 2 teaspoons of margarine, and then around 20 or 12 to 20 nuts. And then it also wants you to include 1 serving of protein, and their serving counts as 2 to 3 ounces. So if you look at the size of your hand, your palm, an average size palm is around 4 ounces. So based off this, they want you to have a protein portion smaller than the size of your palm. And then they also want you to include 1 serving of grain. So 1 serving is equivalent or it equals 15 grams of carbs. So that would look like 1 slice of bread, 1/3 cup of cooked pasta, 1/3 cup of cooked rice, a tortilla. And then half of your plate, according to the plate method, should be of non-starchy vegetables. So if you remember, the non-starchy vegetables have little effect on your blood glucose. And examples of this are like broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, green beans, tomatoes, onions, asparagus, cabbage. And then according to the My Plate, they want you to have 1 serving of dairy. So that is either like 8 ounces of milk or a cup of low-fat yogurt. And then they also want you to include 1 serving of fruit. Awesome. And then this slide goes over the differences between My Plate and the plate method. So if you noticed, the last one, the plate method, had the inclusion of fats. And that is really important when we talk about a balanced diet for diabetes. So it's very important to include protein, fat, and carbohydrates at every meal. And when doing that, what it does is it slows down the digestion of the carbohydrates, so then it doesn't spike your blood sugar, raise your blood sugar as quickly as just eating carbs were. So that is why a balanced diet is very important. And then increasing servings of non-starchy vegetables is included in My Plate, and it wasn't in, or excuse me, it was included in the plate method and was not included in My Plate. And then decreasing portions of grains at each meal was included in the plate method. So what are some quick and easy ways that you can start eating healthy for diabetes? The first is reduce your sugar and sugar sweetened food intake. So what that would look like is instead of drinking regular Coke, you would have Diet Coke. Instead of eating like regular cookies, you could have sugar-free cookies, or instead of eating like a whole pack of cookies, you could have half of a pack. It doesn't necessarily have to mean um, cutting sugar out completely or like the simple sugars out completely. It's just knowing when to sometimes eat them or limit them. And then establishing regular eating habits is very huge. So it's really important that you guys are eating all 3 meals and not skipping any meals and eating roughly at the same time each day. The third is maintaining a healthy weight. So that could be through weight loss if needed, or just even exercising or moving your body. And then the last one is balance your meals with protein and fat. So if you remember me going over the last slide, when you eat a carb, a fat, and a protein, the carbohydrates don't break down as quickly, so it doesn't affect your blood sugar as quickly as it would if you just ate sources of carbs. So some other tips, very similar to the last slide, is eat breakfast every day. So don't skip meals. It's very important to consume meals at the same time every day and not skip them. Increase your fiber intake, and you can do this by eating more whole grains. You can do this by, instead of drinking juice, have a real fruit, or increasing your vegetable intake. And then choose a variety of foods at each meal. So again, don't only eat sources of protein or don't only eat sources of carbs. Make sure you're varying them. Choosing sugar-free options, and we went over that one on the last slide as well, and then exercising regularly. And we will go over why that is important in part 3 of this presentation. Awesome. So if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to pause the video and answer them as needed. So next we will be moving into part 2, where we will talk about reading a food label, a carb consistent diet, what are considered free foods, and then choosing healthier options from canteen. So this is a food label. I'm sure everyone has seen this image before. So the first thing that everyone should look at is the servings per container and the serving size. So this item is a Pop-Tart. So I know in Pop-Tarts, there are usually like 2 pastries in one package. However, the serving size is only 1 pastry. So it is really important to look at the serving size. And 1 serving is all of these values. So after we check the serving, if we're looking for carbs, we scroll down to total carbohydrate in right here. And then under, it'll tell you how much fiber. So remember, fiber is a carb, total sugars, and this is a huge one right here is where I want to draw your attention to is added sugars. So added sugars are the same as simple sugars. So they're what would spike your blood sugar quickly. So the lower amount of added sugar, usually the better. And my quick and easy rule is to look for 10% or less. So if you see it has 30% added sugar, so this would be a food that we would eat sometimes. We would not want to eat this every single day. We want to limit this food, these Pop-Tarts. So I know I mentioned at the beginning what a carb consistent diet is, or that we would be going over it. So what it is you eat 3 meals per day, roughly around the same time, as I mentioned. You eat the same number of carbohydrates each day. So say like roughly around like 180 carbs each day. And this number can be tailored depending on your energy needs. And you would eat the same number of carbohydrates each meal. So you would take the total number of carbohydrates that you're supposed to eat each day, and then you would divide that by how many meals you're eating. So usually 3 meals per day. and then including snacks anywhere from 0 to 3 grams of carbs. And it's very important to remember that one serving of carbs is 15 grams of carbs. So one serving of carbs is 15 grams of carbs. And what does that look like? So that would look like one banana, one slice of bread, an 8-ounce serving of milk, a small apple. So how many servings of carbohydrates should you have per meal? So kind of what I was alluding to on the last slide is if you were having, let's see here, let me do some quick math. So if you were eating 60 grams of carbs for 3 meals, your total would be 180 grams of carbs per day. So if you divided that by 3, it would be 60 grams of carbs per meal, and that would be 4 servings of carbs per meal. So how I like to think about it is think of like the 4 to 5 servings of carbs per meal kind of as like money. So you get to choose where you spend your carbs at each meal. And the information below is kind of a way to guide you of how to spend your carbs. So you don't necessarily have to. But again, this is just going off of the plate method for diabetes. So if you were to eat 60 grams of carbs per meal or 4 servings, because remember, one serving of carbs is 15 grams, you would choose 2 servings of starches. So that could look like 2 slices of bread. It could be 1/3 cup of pasta cooked in a slice of bread. It could be whatever you want to choose. But you would get essentially 30 grams of carbs for starches or 2 servings. You would choose 1 serving of fruit, so 15 grams of carbs of fruit, and then you would choose one dairy option or 15 grams of carbs from dairy. And again, these are just suggestions. You don't have to spend it in that way, but you always can. And then free foods are those that do not raise your blood sugar or have a very small effect on your blood sugar. And remember, those are like fat and protein and non-dairy veggies. So you would choose a 2 to 3 ounce serving of protein per meal, a 1 serving of fat, and 1 to 2 cups of non-starchy vegetables. So how can you use your new knowledge to order from Canteen? So you could choose sugar-free beverage options such as water, which isn't always as fun, but it is also a good option to stay hydrated as well. You could choose like sugar-free or Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi. You could choose sugar-free drink mixes, coffee and tea. You do have to be careful when choosing coffee because some of the coffee has added sugar. But you guys do now know how to read a food label, so you could always check the amount of added sugar. And remember, 10% or less is what the goal is. Some other snacks that are low in added sugar are saltine crackers, instant oatmeal, raisin bran, plain rice or rice with sugar-free seasoning, sugar-free oatmeal cookies, and popcorn. And then some other options are, or options for protein are chicken, tuna, sardines, mackerel, sunflower seeds, and there's also an unsalted tropical nut mix that are all good options. And at this time, you can pause the video and allow for any questions. So moving on ahead into part 3. So there are diabetes-related complications such as hypertension and high cholesterol. And then we will go over sodium in foods and some weight loss strategies or just how to exercise. So the two that I mentioned that are increased, or the two diseases that are increased with diabetes that can be controlled by diet, are hypertension and dyslipidemia. So hypertension is also known as high blood pressure. And then dyslipidemia is when your blood lipids are too low or too high. So how you find this out is usually when you get your labs drawn or your blood drawn, they'll run a lipid panel, and this is what comes up in that lipid panel. So dyslipidemia is when your total cholesterol is too high, your LDL or bad cholesterol is too high, your HDL or good cholesterol is too low, and when your triglycerides are too high. So over in the corner there, you can see the picture of what it looks like for over here on the left. It shows like a healthy artery or no plaque buildup. And then if your cholesterol levels are continuously high, it could end up in phase 4. So when all the cholesterol or plaque builds up in your arteries, and then that can cause adverse conditions such as heart disease. So going back to hypertension, the risk factors for this are age, physical inactivity, weight, a diet high in saturated fat, salt, and cholesterol, genetics, and ethnicity. And uncontrolled hypertension can lead to heart disease. And some ways to manage hypertension are healthy weight loss, eating less salt or sodium, and exercising regularly. And how we check for sodium is we go back to our friend here, the nutrition facts label, and you can look how much sodium is in a food. And very similar to added sugars, which here you could see are 28%. So remember, we're looking for anything under 10%. We could also do that with sodium and saturated fat. So anything under 10% in all three of these items are the foods that we want to eat more often. And if it's higher than 10%, those are the foods that we want to eat sometimes. So again, the sodium, this one is 3%, so this one is low in sodium, but then you also have to check our friend added sugar here and your friend saturated fat. And those, again, should all be under 10%. So going back to cholesterol, diet and lifestyle can have a huge impact on your blood cholesterol. And ways to improve your blood cholesterol are maintaining a healthy weight through exercise or weight loss if needed, increased consumption of unsaturated fat. So unsaturated fat is known as a quote unquote healthier fats. So these ones would have a positive impact on your blood cholesterol. And examples of unsaturated fat are like fish, walnuts, avocado, olives, sources of those. And another way to decrease your blood cholesterol is to eat less saturated fat. And saturated fat comes from red meat or animal products, and then a lot of processed baked goods, because saturated fat or fat in general is usually added to extend the shelf life of foods. So if anything's like very processed, it will have usually a higher quote unquote unhealthy fat content. And then lastly, to improve your cholesterol levels, you can eat fiber. And this includes whole grains, beans, skins of fruit. Oatmeal is an awesome source of fiber. And all of these tips will help you improve your good cholesterol and help you lower your bad cholesterol. So exercise, as you probably have gotten, is very, very important for a healthy lifestyle. And it is recommended that everyone exercises for at least 150 minutes per week. And benefits of this are it decreases your risk of heart disease, it improves your blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, it improves your cholesterol levels, reduces your blood pressure, and it also increases strength and balance. And one thing I really want to stress is exercise doesn't always have to be like running, or it's not always it doesn't always have to be torture, I guess. Exercise is movement in any way. So even if you're going for a walk, if you are um, like moving around, it doesn't always have to be terrible. However, with that being said, it is also important to know the difference between pain and discomfort. So if you're ever in pain, like your joints, your knees, or like your nerves are hurting, then I would try a different exercise and stay away from that exercise that is causing you pain. However, if you're experiencing discomfort, like, oh, this is hard, then that is a good thing. That means you are improving or you're strengthening your muscles or body. And this chart here shows a lot of different body weight exercises that you can be doing throughout the day. And even if you have like 15 minutes every hour, if you just do one exercise, it will improve your overall health significantly. And some additional exercise ideas are here. If you are unable to like get up and walk for any reason, there are exercises that you can do seated as well. One thing that a lot of people have found very helpful is keeping an exercise journal. So exercise journals can help with goal setting, track progress. It helps you maintain a schedule. You can notice any patterns that you're doing, such as your mood. You could even do like the type of workout, and then it provides accountability. I know for me, sometimes just writing something down helps me stick to it. An example of an exercise journal could look like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but this can help you of where to start. So you'd write the date and duration of your exercise. You can write the type of exercise. Some people like to include the calorie intake. It just helps them track their progress. Their current weight, you could even do like a monthly weight, and then your mood. So like when you're working out, were you stressed? Were you happy? And this can help you track that as well. Another trick to weight loss or just overall more balanced diet in general is mindful eating. And this is a strategy that uses mindfulness to bring attention to experiences, cravings, and physical cues when eating. So the idea is that you would eat more slowly with minimal distractions. And I know sometimes if you're eating in like the dining hall, there are a lot of distractions going on. So you could even practice mindful eating when you're eating by yourself, like if you're snacking, and you're supposed to engage your senses. So notice smell, colors, texture, and flavor of food, and then listening to physical hungers or physical cues of hunger and fullness. So the idea is like eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. And I know sometimes this you're not always able to do that, but the overall goal of just like listening to your body and really taking time to enjoy your food is what mindful eating is. And then lastly, you can practice food journaling. It's very similar to exercise journaling. You can even combine the two. So you would write down what you eat, the date, time, locations, amount of food, moods and emotions. This is really important for eating because it would help determine if you're eating out of stress, if you're eating out of sadness or boredom. And then it could help you look for patterns. And you could even write down your blood sugar at the time. So say if you had your blood sugar spiked, if you write down the meal associated with that spike, it might help you track your patterns. And then again, you could always keep your food journaling log and your exercise log into one. And last but not least is unfortunately, diabetes does not have sick days. So even if you aren't feeling well, diabetes does not go away when you are sick. So it is important to keep checking your blood sugar and contact HSU for concerns of medication insulin doses, because if you're not eating, you might not want to take your insulin or your medication. But I would follow their guidelines. For us, however, we have a trick called 15 and 15. So if you aren't eating and you check your blood sugar and it is extremely low, what you're going to do is you're going to eat 15 grams of simple carbs. So that could be like regular soda, jello, popsicles, like hard candy. So you're going to eat 15 grams of a simple carb, and then you're going to wait 15 minutes and recheck your blood sugar. And if your blood sugar has not normalized or gotten back to where it should be, you'll do that process again. So you'll eat 15 more grams of simple carbs, and then you'll wait 15 more minutes. And then hopefully by then your blood sugar will go back to normal. And if not, you will keep doing that process until it goes back to normal. So again, you'll eat 15 grams of simple carbs, wait 15 minutes, and then recheck your blood sugar. So this is a conclusion of the presentation. Some overall tips that I want you guys to carry with you is how to follow a carb consistent diet, not skipping meals, so balancing your meals of protein, fat, and carbs, limiting your added sugar, sodium, and saturated fat to less than 10%, and then increasing non-starchy vegetables at every meal, and then using the plate method for diabetes. So that was the second diagram. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, feel free to email one of the dietitians here at the Department of Correction, as well as contact HSU. And thank you guys for coming to my presentation.